Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Film Foundations, the collaborative show between Weirding Way Media and Someone's Favorite Productions. I am one of your co-hosts, Chris Dashew, from Weirding Way Media, but more specifically, the Culture Cast.
And I am Ryan Verrill from The Disconnected, and less specifically, Someone's Favorite Productions.
On this show, we ask and answer 4 questions about a given topic that is surrounding either a director, franchise, microgenre, or in this episode's case, if you clicked on it, you know what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about one of the smartest asses in Hollywood right now, if not the smart ass of smart asses, the charismatic Canadian, otherwise known as Ryan Reynolds.
One of the literal most mainstream popular actors possible, as if somebody's clicking on this and going, I've never watched a Ryan Reynolds film. But hey, we're going to answer some questions about it.
Well, see, that's the thing, though. Like, maybe they haven't watched a Ryan Reynolds movie is maybe the point that I would be kind of getting at here just at the outset. I think it's safe to say that if you're listening to this episode and you are not super familiar with Ryan Reynolds, there will be one thing that sticks out to you that you have seen him in. That may or may not show up, but what's funny is we always kind of joke about the MCU just showing up in our episodes. This one, it might be an answer, I think, for the first time even. So yeah, Ryan Reynolds is, what's funny is I feel like I've had Ryan Reynolds in my life for a very long time. Since I was 14. Because I remember the first thing I saw him in, which was not the first thing that he was in, but it's kind of in reference to one of the more famous things that he was in, I believe, or at least it's like halfway in reference to it. But we'll talk a little bit more about it. But when we get to it, but Ryan, I'm curious, what are your thoughts about the man whose name you share? That's right. This is also Ryan and Ryan. What do you think of Ryan?
This is one of those things like he's completely fine. He's a decent comedic actor. I feel like we haven't seen him act his heart out in a great dramatic role that he had to actually play a part that wasn't literally just Ryan Reynolds, especially in quite some time. But at the same time, he's kind of smarmy. He's kind of an asshole. And the funny thing is, I think that's just like this persona that he plays up. But a lot of people don't like him because of that. He just comes across as this full of himself person. But that ends up just being the character that he plays in every movie. I've got nothing against the person. I think he is, again, fairly benign across the board. I've liked plenty of his films that he's been in. There's a few I've not liked that much. But for the most part, I think he's decent at what he does.
I couldn't agree more. I love Ryan Reynolds. He is someone that you and I probably feel a little kinship towards in terms of being able to be smarmy on the point at the moment, have a quick answer for something. I always appreciate that about Ryan Reynolds, either in movies or just I think in real life. He seems very well attuned to who he is and what he can do, and I appreciate that because that I don't know, it paves the way for people like ourselves who are able to be funny and kind of charismatic, but at the same time a little smarmy, but they know that the smarminess is not that it's not serious, but it's different. Like there's a difference between, say, like a Ryan Reynolds smarminess and I'm trying to think of somebody else who's like a smarmy that nobody likes.
Simon Cowell.
James Corden, I think, kind of comes to mind.
Well.
The name dropper himself. He dropped so many names on the ground. Help him pick them all up. But that's the thing. I mean, I think of Ryan Reynolds as kind of in a class of his own as an actor in terms of being able to just be seemingly himself, and the suit, the strong suit is that suit, is him, and he is that person kind of in every role seemingly, even when it definitely is not the direction that it needs to go. And to your point, sometimes he does things that I just don't get, but that's fine because, again, I think what's also interesting about Ryan Reynolds is he does not seem to just do mainstream stuff. He kind of works all over the board. And look, he's been acting since the late 90s. So that's a pretty big filmography. But actually, if I were to compare him to someone, he's like the smarmy version of Keanu Reeves. You know, like everybody loves Keanu, and for good reason. Like Keanu seems like a genuine person. He's tried to stay out of the limelight the best that he can, and, you know, have a private life. And I mean, Ryan Reynolds, pretty private guy for the most part. I mean, we know that he's married to he has been married to Scarlett Johansson, and now he is married to Blake Lively. So he's been married to Blake Lively for 12 years, which in this industry that's a fucking lifetime, frankly. I mean, Freddie Prinze Jr. And Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar are still married, for that matter. Yeah. Like, there are some people that are still out there doing it, but Ryan Reynolds, it feels like he has kept himself out of, I don't know, like the dirt sheets, as it were. Like, I don't hear anything bad about Ryan Reynolds. Like, he seems like a genuine guy. Him and Rob McElhenney, Jesus, how the hell do you say his name? That whole thing with Welcome to Wrexham, I'm a huge fan of that. I mean, as someone who's a huge fan of the Champions League. But yeah, Ryan Reynolds, this is going to be an interesting episode because there are a lot of directions that we could go. I mean, comedy is the obvious direction for a whole host of reasons. Yep. That's why he was cast as the character that made him famous. But I would concede that he kind of just already was that way, and they kind of just forced. I mean, they didn't have to force Deadpool very hard into that box, but it was a box that it was like, you know, it fit pretty well. They just had to maybe sand off a couple edges. But yeah, Ryan Reynolds for me he's one of the good ones in the industry, seemingly, that keeps to himself, is married to someone famous. They try to stay out of the limelight, and I don't know. He seems like an arbiter of positivity in the industry, which is, again, in short supply in these days.
I would also point out there's quite a few things we do know about him that is public. So not all of it is private, but what's crazy is it's very like calculated public information.
Right.
Primarily like the stuff that he's investing in. And he's grown a lot of those things to crazy heights. Like he was like a quarter owner of Mint Mobile for the longest time and was the spokesperson, and then they got bought out, and he made a shit ton of money and went and invested that in other things. And then the Wrexham thing happened. Obviously, he is Aviator Gin, like everywhere across the world.
That's true.
He's done that for a few things. So, there's a few things that we know publicly, like the charity donations and all that, which we might be able to talk about a little bit later. But yeah, he's done a lot in honestly not that long of a period of time. He's had a hell of a trajectory. And when you talk about everybody likes him, we kind of should just like get it out in the open right now that the biggest thing about Ryan Reynolds that everybody knows is that he's fucking hot. Like, he's great looking. I mean,
hey, wait, the non-gay guy said this? Okay, go for it.
I had
He's a little gay, right?
It's a spectrum, but
well, yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, it is a spectrum. I'm agreeing with you. He's a good-looking guy, obviously. Like, he's married to Blake Lively. They have beautiful children, of course. Like, you know, it's not like a Hugh Jackman thing where he married a normal person. He married his co-star from Green Lantern, who is also very good-looking, just like his first wife, who's one of the most good-looking people on the planet. So,
after he was engaged to Alanis Morissette. Too.
Yeah, geez, Louisiana. Holy cow.
He's been voted the sexiest person alive for People or whatever magazine does it. He was on the list a couple times before that. He is like the go-to straight man answer for the hottest guy in the world, and based on that, he's gotten like multiple cameos just being the random hot guy that shows up. That's just what everybody knows him for.
I mean, he's a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
They don't cast people in the MCU that are hard on the eyes. I mean,
Stellan Skarsgård begs to differ.
Oh, I love Stellan Skarsgård. Come on.
I do too, but I also just watched
man.
I just watched Nymphomaniac, and I will never look at him the same.
You're going to look at him askance now, is what you're saying? We need somebody to do the Stellan Skarsgård episode so we could talk about the girl with the dragon tattoo. Because we'll have to wait for somebody to do Fincher, I guess, or Daniel Craig or Rooney Mara. But if I were to place bets, I feel like I know which one of those four things will show up first, and it's definitely the director of it all.
What what if we get like Scandinavian adaptations first?
Well, I don't know if that would. Well, yeah, oddly specific. We have to get really niche to get there. But that's the thing that's nice about doing this episode on Ryan Reynolds is we're going to have answers from all over the kind of spectrum of genres, from superhero movies to horror movies to like straight up comedies to more comic book movies to serious things. So I'm very curious to kind of see where we go here. But like we've kind of alluded to, Ryan Reynolds has been working in the industry since the late 90s. He started work in Canada on a Canadian soap opera in the early 90s. And then obviously went through some interesting times in the 2000s. He was in National Lampoon's Van Wilder. He was in The Proposal. He was in Buried. And I'm trying to think, there's a couple. I mean, the 2000s, there was a lot. But obviously, there's a big moment in 2016. So in 2016, he becomes Deadpool after somebody, totally not him, leaked the test footage from the... It was like a short that they were doing, something to that effect, and it got leaked on the internet. Everybody went apeshit for it, and now he is Deadpool and is printing money like it's going out of style.
We probably should say, though, we have to acknowledge the fact that he was Deadpool before that. That's the weirdest thing about this whole story.
Yeah, fair, but I know that he acknowledges it, but I didn't want to acknowledge it here because I feel like there may be a reason to acknowledge it later. But yes, in 2009, he played Deadpool in which the character of Deadpool in that movie is not the character of Deadpool. It is something else entirely. And I mean, look, they kind of... Is it Deadpool 1 or Deadpool 2 where they talk about it? I think it's Deadpool 1 where he kind of alludes to... Or is it the second one?
Yeah, he does reference it.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool is kind of its own thing, but it is him. It is ultimately just Ryan Reynolds. But yes, to your point, 2009... But it wasn't for another 7 years until it really became what it is now, which is we're, as we record this now, on the cusp of the latest and probably last Deadpool movie. Maybe, probably not. I can't imagine now that they have the opportunity. Now they're just gonna be like, we got you for life. So yeah, I mean, good or bad. I mean, look, we'll talk about it when we talk about it. But I think what I'm excited in this episode is that we have a large spectrum of things that we could go to, which has not that hasn't been the case, but when we did Meryl Streep, it was a lot of serious stuff, like a lot of serious movies. There are some serious movies on the list. Whether or not they will be picks is a different story, but they'll probably get mentioned offhand, which means Ryan will just have to add that many more links to the podcast description so you guys can go check those things out without having to try very hard.
It's true. It's true. Let's get to question one then, Chris. So what do you think is the foundational title for Ryan Reynolds?
So it is not Deadpool. However, I assumed that you may have thought that is what I was going to pick, and it would have been a fair pick. It may be your pick, frankly. You wanted me to go first because you're like, well, I might change my answer. So my answer is 2002's National Lampoon's Van Wilder. I think that is, for me, that was the first time I saw him, and I think that character has informed every character we have seen since in any of these movies. It is very much Ryan Reynolds dialed up to 11, and National Lampoon's Van Wilder, on top of everything else, it's a funny movie, it's a funny college movie, and it's a funny college movie that has National Lampoon's in the title that isn't Animal House, which I think, on top of everything else, should be kind of, celebrated because there aren't a lot of great National Lampoon's college movies that aren't Animal House. It's kind of this one. There's even a sequel to this one, which is not great. Van Wilder, The Rise of Taj, which was a misguided attempt to make Kal Penn anything other than one of the people who ended up being in the Barack Obama White House for everybody playing along. And also, I believe Kal Penn is gay. I believe as well, which is
Sure is.
awesome. And it's a crazy. It's really crazy to think about Harold and Kumar go to White Castle, and you have Neil Patrick Harris and Cal Penn in the car together, two guys who at the time were not known as gay men in Hollywood, but very much are now. Van Wilder for me, I just think it's in a lot of ways it feels like a spiritual successor to Animal House. And what's funny is in Animal House you have like four or five main characters. In Van Wilder, it's really just him, Ryan Reynolds, and he has a range to him as an actor that he can kind of cover the bases of all the characters from the other movie. And you have Tim Matheson in the movie playing his dad, which kind of just feels like this is meant to be a sequel to Animal House in anything but name. Like, oh, this is the son of Tim Matheson's character from Animal House because he's kind of smarmy in the way that Tim Matheson is in Animal House. But look, I all this to say, Ryan Reynolds elevates this movie way beyond where it deserves to be. There are plenty of National Lampoon's movies that kind of just are there, that exist, that not very many people have seen because they're DTV or just not great. But for me, this movie, I think it still holds up. I rewatched it for this episode to make sure that it still holds up. There are a couple things that are, pretty fucking gross in the movie that still make me laugh. There's a dog jizz in eclairs. I'll say that much. That scene alone is probably, when they were writing that scene in the writer's room, that someone was just laughing their ass off. And Ryan Reynolds is pitch perfect in the movie. It's actually a pretty good role for Tara Reid too, someone who, speaking of ups and downs with their career, and yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm a fan of a good college movie. I really am. That's a micro genre, maybe not deep enough. Maybe people returning to college is probably a better micro genre, but I like these kinds of movies, and Ryan Reynolds is so good in this movie. So good in this movie. And, like I kind of alluded to, his character kind of sort of comes back in Harold and Kumar because it's more or less meant to be Van Wilder, I think. Right. Like, it's like he's a doctor, he's in a hospital, I don't even say he reacts the way Van Wilder would have, but you have Cal Penn interacting with him again. They kind of pretend to recognize each other. He kind of looks at each other weird. So that for me is also the other thing. Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, another kind of seminal film for me growing up. That was a big movie I saw at the right time. And I hadn't even smoked a single fucking joint. I actually haven't seen it since I have started smoking weed. So, which is weird, and I kind of want to go and rewatch it now that I'm fully ensconced in the marijuana lifestyle. But long answer to a short question, Van Wilder. What do you think about Van Wilder, Ryan?
I remember liking it quite a bit, and I think at this point, I don't know that I've seen it in about 18 years.
Sounds about right.
It's been a very long time. This is a movie that was hilarious at the time. It hit in that range of like post-American Pie college movies that felt like all the rage for a little bit. There was a lot of college wannabe comedies that were coming in around then, like Old School and this. Right. And
I love Old School, man. Good Lord, another good one.
So many of those were well done. Unfortunately, they did start to blur a little bit because there were so many coming out. And so, yeah, this is good. I feel like it's really the important part here is what you said at the very beginning is this sort of sets the tone of what he's going to be known for the rest of his career. It's that witty, quick talking,
snappy too. Very snappy. He doesn't even let you say anything before he's getting back at you. Like Ryan Reynolds is he is so able to be spontaneous with what he does. There's a level of spontaneity to the comedy that you feel with Ryan Reynolds. Even if it's baked into the script, they know that he can have that comedic timing, and he does. I mean, it's not a surprise he's in a lot of comedic stuff. He has great comedic timing. For someone who's not a, quote, comedian by trade, unquote, he has fantastic comedic timing.
I agree, which is why, like, he is kind of perfect for the character of Deadpool. The way the comic was written,
Yep.
he is the person that was made to play Deadpool.
I
Like,
literally
there's no
can't even
arguing
think of
that.
anybody else. Like, if you
No.
sat me down in 2016 and were like, who should play Deadpool? There's no way the answer isn't Ryan Reynolds. Like,
Well, and funny enough, the only one that I've ever pictured that could have maybe gotten close, but I don't think he could really pull it off, is somebody you already mentioned. I could have seen Neil Patrick Harris doing it
ooh,
at his peak, perhaps.
oh,
But
okay, okay.
unfortunately, he was very deep in How I Met Your Mother at that point. So
You know who I would actually, if it's the fantasy book Deadpool, there is a universe where Chris Pratt was Deadpool. And like I say that because like there was a time where everybody was high on Chris Pratt, myself included. That is not the case anymore for a whole host of reasons. But he kind of at a time was close to like, he's kind of close in terms of the comedy and the self-awareness and stuff. I'm glad that never happened. But yeah, Ryan Reynolds just look, when that footage came out and everybody was like, why didn't they make this? I mean, yeah, like once you saw it and understood, it's like, all right, this
Right.
has to happen. So what is your answer, Ryan? I have to know. I'm so curious.
Okay, so as we are discussing Deadpool, I want to bring up. This is not going to be my answer. Deadpool is a great movie, but I think he's got a lot more range than an MCU film. So I'm going to talk about something else.
How
And
dare
the one
you
I'm going to talk about,
besmirch the range of an MCU film? How dare you?
the one I'm going to talk about is a quite personal film for me. I don't know if I've mentioned on this show yet, but in my regular day-to-day job, I work in immigration. And so I was really charmed by the story in The Proposal.
Oh,
Not
okay.
not only that, I think this has a remarkable cast for what should have just been like a flash in the pan rom com. Obviously, it is all held to the foundation by the Queen Sandra Bullock. She is like the modern rom com queen for everybody.
Sandy B.
Ryan Reynolds, of course, playing off of her. Malin Ackerman, who's pretty hilarious.
Speaking of Harold and Kumar.
There you go. Craig T. Nelson coming in there playing Ryan Reynolds' father. Mary Steenburgen is in there, but the big one, Betty White, steals this entire movie. She is freaking hilarious in this. But for the whole immigration thing that I led with there, the whole plot here centers around Sandra Bullock being a Canadian executive for a company who learns that she's about to be deported from the U.S. because her visa needs to be renewed, and it was denied. So she's going to try to like keep her position as this big CEO or editor or whatever that she is in this company, and to do that, she wants to get married. She wants to get a green card. So she is trying to essentially talk Ryan Reynolds into marrying her. And the story itself is surrounding the proposal, if they're actually going to fall in love. And unfortunately, there's all kinds of like immigration to-dos around that because it is a very official process. I like this movie quite a bit. I feel like it's a really well-made modern rom-com, which I gotta be honest, there's not been a lot of them that I've loved since, I don't know, like the late 90s ish, maybe a couple in the early 2000s. But this one's up there for me as one of the best of the new millennium, and stoked to be able to talk about it because I don't think enough people talk about it now. And yeah, that cast, man. I didn't mention Oscar from The Office. Oscar Nunez is great in this as well. Yeah, good movie. What do you think of The Proposal?
I am shocked that that was your answer. I mean, it's good. I think anybody listening to this is going to be shocked by both of our answers.
Yeah.
And I think what's even funnier, and I'm very curious, not to jump ahead to the second question, but again, given that we're kind of in the mix right now, is your second answer going to be before or after Deadpool?
It'll be before.
Oh, that's interesting. Same with mine. There's that weird inflection point in his career with Deadpool where like it's not that I think he stops making interesting stuff, but everything kind of feels a little one note after Deadpool, I would say.
And that's why all of my picks are before Deadpool. I feel
Same.
like he gave his best performances before he just became the easy guy to spit out the same role film after film after film.
Right. I mean, if it works, it works. But
Yeah.
look, I mean, there like to compare it to someone else like Chris Hemsworth does not just make Thor movies or action movies. He does do other stuff.
Right.
And he can be funny. I mean, not in Ghostbusters 2016, but in an underseen movie, I guess it would be considered a legacy sequel to National Lampoon's Vacation. He's pretty good in that movie. But yeah,
Even the first Thor movie, he's pretty funny in that.
I mean, the first Thor movie, his eyebrows are all I can think about. His blonde eyebrows.
He did look very different in that movie compared to the following movies.
Well, it's a serious film directed by Kenneth Branagh, don't you know? I still do not understand. I mean, I get it, but then I don't get it because they didn't let him do the Kenneth Branagh thing. Anyways, MCU aside, my answer for the next question is pre-Deadpool, but it's very interesting because for me, like I said, I kind of feel like a lot of the stuff post-Deadpool is okay. It's fine. But I don't know how to put this any other way, but once he was Deadpool, it's kind of like everybody was in on the secret that Ryan Reynolds was awesome.
Right.
I mean, like, and it's like, look, if I could have answered 4 different ways on this first question, everything I'm answering is a comedy, essentially. Like the other 2 things that I would have picked, 3 things are essentially just comedies, more or less. Like maybe there's a little bit of high concept to it, but ultimately, end of the day, still comedy or comedy adjacent. I mean, even Deadpool is comedy, if not comedy adjacent, right? But yeah, like I was just curious because my answer for number 2, the lesser known one, is pre-Deadpool. Deadpool is just such a big moment in his career, you can't get around it.
Well, what's interesting about this is, yes, it's a giant moment, but when you think about it, that's only been 8 years.
I know.
Deadpool only came out 8 years ago. And what's crazier is he's got a ton of credit since then. But because his roles are literally just him, no makeup, acting like Ryan Reynolds, it's all easy. So he pumps out like 3 of these a year. And so you get Freak Eye and Detective Pikachu.
The Hitman's Bodyguard. Wait a second. Detective Pikachu is great. That's
I'm not saying it's not.
No, I know, but like that for me is the exception of all of those. But at the same time, to your point, it is just a voice role. Like,
right. He doesn't have to work like he's not spreading himself thin as an actor or breaking barriers or anything like that.
Right. And I mean, I look at something like Red Notice or Free Guy or The Hitman's Bodyguard, which I saw in theaters. I do not know why. 2017 was a simpler time. There was a sequel to that movie, dude. The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Like, people liked that movie enough. They liked Samuel L. Jackson and Ryan Reynolds enough. No, they liked Ryan Reynolds enough is what it was. Because I remember watching that movie and just thinking to myself, like, man, this is just like Deadpool light. Like, not as good. That's the thing. Like, then everything starts feeling like a poor facsimile of Deadpool because the original Deadpool is so well done. On top of everything else, like, I went and rewatched it this weekend in preparation for this. It still holds up. Second one's a little bit of a different story. Second one goes some interesting places. Maybe it kind of spreads itself a little too thin. But OG Deadpool's great. I mean, it's just as impactful now as it was in 2016. Knocking on the door of the new one coming out especially. And now we have to see what that means for the MCU because that's the other thing. In 2016, it was just a fucking Deadpool movie. Right. It wasn't Deadpool in the MCU. So now it's like, well, what does that mean? So, I mean, it's just wild because I don't want to be like that guy, but man, I saw Ryan Reynolds in the early 2000s just like you did. Like, it's weird that now he's Deadpool more than anything else.
Well, funny enough, I saw Ryan Reynolds in the late 90s. I was one of the people watching Two Guys and a Girl way back in the day.
Really?
Yeah, I watched it on TV when I was a kid.
It's wild, dude. That show was only on for like 2 years, 3 years?
2 or 3 seasons, yeah.
Well,
it's a completely different life.
Richard Rococolo and Trailer Howard. Trailer Howard, otherwise known as I Made All My... Was she the one that was on Monk? She was the one that was Monk's sidekick, right? Trailer Howard? She was Jim Carrey's wife in Me, Myself, and Irene at the beginning of the movie. The one that leaves him. Trailer Howard, yeah. Yeah. What a weird show. what a weird life Ryan Reynolds has led. All of the
Oh
things
yeah.
that he's done, because he was even, I mean, he was in the X Files. He was in the X Files in like 1996.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, so was Jack Black, so was Giovanni Ribisi. There are
Tons of people.
yeah, yeah, tons of people that are like really famous now. I have to ask you though, before we go to the next question, if you were to pick something else for a foundational title, do you have like a secondary answer? You did. You said you did.
In case you didn't, I could have easily said Deadpool.
Okay, so your other one was just going to be Deadpool.
Yeah, and the reason
That's
is
fair.
because it's just him. It's
Right.
literally his personality on screen with some funny burn makeup, and that's it. Like there's not a lot of stretch happening there. He doesn't have to do a whole lot. He just plays himself,
And that's okay in that movie. Like I think
and
it's
it
like
works. Yeah.
it's just beyond that. I think.
Well, even then, like a lot of his roles since 2016, again, are just normal white guy. Like
Right.
you're playing funny white guy friend who's the main character in many of these movies, and that's it. That's your entire role.
Yeah. I had a different answer if it had been if you had answered something not comedic, I was going to do a not comedic one as well. So my other answer, and this genuinely, I think if you want to watch Ryan Reynolds stuff and you want to watch his less comedic stuff, I think the best not comedic thing that he has done, and I think it's so impressive too, is 2010's Buried. I
Okay.
mean, it's like, oh my god, like that. When I saw that movie, I thought it was like the craziest thing, and it's
I
still
thought this was going
it's
to be your answer for the second question. Though.
really, it's not. It would have. It was vying for first with Van Wilder for serious. Buried is really good. I enjoy it immensely. It's a fucking bummer of a movie, but that's okay. Not
It takes a
everything
lot
has to be upbeat.
It takes a lot to get an entire audience to invest in a film when you're the only thing on camera in a tiny box for most of the movie.
It's Ryan Reynolds in a coffin buried in the ground, folks. That's the entire setup of the movie. And that is the entire movie, effectively.
Oh, and he has a cell phone, so he's able
Yeah.
to talk to people.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole movie, pretty much. It is riveting, frankly.
Yeah. Yep, won't go into any further spoilers. But now, like, I'm dying to hear what is your lesser known title within his oeuvre that perhaps might not be best as a first time watch for somebody that's coming into Ryan Reynolds.
See, that's the thing. I don't think there's any one thing on this list that's like a bad choice for like a secondary one. Like you said, like not coming in at the, the right spot. Like for the most part, most of these movies, like they're not really challenging you. Let's just put it that way. Like, a lot of this stuff is mainstream fare for the most part.
While that's true, there's some of these movies like Barry that wouldn't really give you a hint into the rest of his career.
Right.
And obviously, if you went like, let's go watch Blade Trinity, you wouldn't be like, oh my god, I want to go watch all of his movies now.
So my answer is Blade Trinity. No, I'm just kidding. What's funny is, if anything, Blade Trinity is just proto Deadpool.
Yeah.
Like totally proto Deadpool, to the point where in that movie he steals the movie.
Yep.
Cock juggling thunder cunt, I believe, is that one of his lines?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, my answer is not Blade Trinity. It is, again, another comedy and a movie that barely ekes in pre-Deadpool. I think it's, of all the movies that I have seen with Ryan Reynolds in it, I think it's the most interesting because it's kind of just similarly to Deadpool. It is Ryan Reynolds and Ryan Reynolds and Ryan Reynolds and Ryan Reynolds and more Ryan Reynolds.
Are we about to have the same
2014's
answer?
The Voices.
I love this movie. This is my pick.
Is it your pick too? God damn it. It's such a good movie, and like nobody has seen it. It's a
Right.
movie where Ryan Reynolds can hear his animals talking to him, and they have his voice because he's schizophrenic, and he's trying to be secretive about his schizophrenia, and then he just starts killing people. It is fucking insane. The fact that I don't know how many people saw it. Like, I feel like, again, you've seen it. I'm not surprised to learn that you've seen it, but it's a great movie. Mary Jane Satrapi hasn't done a whole lot else. I mean, she did the Mary Curie movie with Rosamund Pike, I believe, from a couple of years ago, like 5 years ago at this point. But yeah, The Voices is just, oh man, what a weird movie. I mean, a guy with schizophrenia who hears his animals talking to him, and then he starts killing people. It's kind of Son of Sam adjacent, but like, what if it was funny, but not really funny? Like, it's funny, but it's not, but it isn't. And the cast is insane, but again, 2014 was a different time. Jenna Arterton, Anna Kendrick, I mean, those two alone, and Ryan Reynolds. But yeah, the voices. Sorry to steal your answer, but I mean, even Ryan Reynolds has gone on the record saying it's one of my favorite movies I've ever done. Never really got its day in court, but man, it's weird and fun and beautiful. He said it best, and I'll leave it at that.
This movie is often described as a horror comedy, but it's so much more than that. It's not really a horror comedy. If anything, I would call it a comedy horror, because the comedy comes first in every single scene in this. There's nothing that is scary for the viewer. There are scenes that would be welcome in a horror movie as well, but done with a comedic tone. And I know you mentioned the two female leads in this, but man, shout out Anna Kendrick. She is amazing in this movie. Her reactions is possibly like some of her best acting in a movie that's not a straight drama. Like she does great in stuff like Up in the Air and stuff like that. But specifically, the way that she is horrified in this movie is great. If you are interested in the world of psychology at all, this is a very interesting movie just to see the way that they choose to portray it. The hallucinations of schizophrenia are very difficult to get on screen, and they do it very, very well. It is almost like a borderline workplace comedy in a few different ways. But man, when it gets weird, they lean into it. And for a movie that is this mainstream with these people, you don't expect it, and they pull it off in a way that is great. And I would say it is primarily mentioned here because it is so lesser known that most people have never even heard of this movie, which is wild, because this should be like listed as one of his 10 best movies forever. This is easily one of his top 5 for me. I love this movie. Underseen, highly recommend it. Go check it out. It's cheap to watch. It's always streaming. Like, Lionsgate doesn't care about it because it made no money. Right. So they're like, yeah, just give it to everybody. Who cares?
What's funny is I honestly, I think a good double feature for the voices would be the voices and Anthony Hopkins' Magic. Very similar ideas in terms of like inanimate objects or things that can't talk telling you to do things, and it's clearly just like the main character is losing their mind.
Yeah.
The Voices is such a fun, weird movie, and I'm glad that even Ryan Reynolds like acknowledges that. Like, even he's like, this movie didn't get seen by enough people, and I love it because that for me, you know, in a lot of ways, like, I bet if we were like, hey, Ryan Reynolds, do you want to talk about something? Like, reach out to him, which, you know, you can do in this industry. You know, IMDb Pro exists. Go on there, find their publicist email, hit send, see what happens. I guarantee you if we asked him to talk to us for 20 minutes about Deadpool, he'd say no. But if we asked to speak to him for 20 minutes about The Voices, we'd probably get 30 to 40 minutes of him nonstop talking about it, because I can't imagine many people, if anyone, is beating down his door to talk about it, but he knows how important it is. We got to talk to Jack Black a long time ago because of Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny. He wouldn't have done it for anything else, is kind of what we were told, because it's something he cares about. The Voices is similarly, I feel like, for Ryan Reynolds, because that quote that I read was from 2020, 6 years after the movie came out. Like, yeah, it's a good one. It's really like one of the last things he's in that he could be in like that before Deadpool. Really.
Just to give a different answer, that way we have
let's have a different answer, Ryan.
A proper number. I'm going to go again away from comedy. I'm probably going to get a lot of people on the horror side of things pissed off at me and stick up for 2005's The Amityville Horror.
Wow, that's not the answer I was expecting you to go with for horror.
This remake is pretty good. It agreed. Stands up to the original. It is not something that I would say sullies the good Amityville name. which I do say kind of jokingly, considering now there's more than 160 movies with the word Amityville in the title.
I was going to say, what does the name of Amityville mean other than two people ripping a bunch of people off? I mean, that's what it is.
It's worse than that. There's a movie out there called The Amityville Vibrator. There's a recent movie called Amityville Karen.
Yeah, the Amityville Ouija board one. Yeah, Amityville has just become like, similarly to Hellraiser, like a thing you can put in front of movies to be like, oh, it has, 1/100th of mainstream appeal, which is enough to get 5 people to watch your movie. So, and they're always streaming. It's on Tubi right now for free. I mean, that's really the reality.
This movie's pretty good. Ryan Reynolds plays the George Lutz character, the father figure for the Amityville home. This is also the first movie starring Chloe Grace Moretz. This is the first movie she was ever in. This is pretty well made. You see a lot of topless or sweaty in a white t-shirt Ryan Reynolds.
With like a beard,
a lot.
Too.
Oh, yeah.
Beard daddy Ryan Reynolds.
He's got to look like Daddy Brolin from that first one, so he goes all in on it. But yeah, this movie is well done. It's got some pretty good scares in it, and really interesting boat setup behind the house that plays for a couple of fantastic scenes. Didn't make a ton of money. I think eventually it ended up with like 60 million, 70 million, something like that. Critically, it didn't do that well. Most people scored this like less than 5 out of 10 or whatever, and unfortunately, it's got a pretty crappy reputation. But in the grand scheme of modern horror and also horror remakes, which were huge around when this came out, this is one of like the actually better films compared to, I don't know, The Haunting.
Whoa, okay, you went too far there.
The Haunting is pure garbage.
I'm kidding. The Jan de Bont's take on a horror movie, you're right. What's funny is we could and should totally do an episode on those 2000 remakes as a micro genre, because there are a lot. I mean, Amityville is just one of the lesser ones, but there are a fair amount of lesser ones. I actually watched this movie either last year or the year before. It's fine. It's way better than it has any right to be. And it's better than some of I think Amityville 2. Is Amityville 2 the one with the giant hand that comes out of the portal at the end of the movie? Is that the one? I think it is. Or Amityville 3. Those movies are, beyond the first one, are kind of hard to get through.
I disagree there. I think Amityville 2 is better than the first one.
Is it? Well, which one is the one with the hand that comes out of the portal? Is it the second one? Because one of them's just wild, and I was like, I don't know if this is a good movie, but it's insane. That might be the second one. But
it might be. It's been a while.
Where the priest gets like grabbed by the monster on his face and shit. That's the second one, I'm pretty sure.
It could be. Vinegar Syndrome put out Amityville 4, 5, and 6, and they're so great. Like genuinely really well made, fun movies from the 90s.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're worth seeking out, all of those.
Interesting. I'll have to check them out. I've never heard anybody say check out Amityville 4, 5, and 6, but you have, so I believe you.
The first one is like, it's got this big reputation, but honestly, I'd say 2 through 6 are all more entertaining films, at least.
Yeah, that whatever one with like the monster hand, that one is way more the original one's fine, but the problem with the original one is it's being played straight, and we all know it's bullshit. So,
yeah.
Like, the real thing that happened is bullshit, and the problem when you're tackling something real is once it's found out that it's horseshit, the movie holds no water. And the Lutzes, I mean, look, the Lutzes had a great story, obviously. They made money off of the story. But as someone who spent 5 years making a podcast talking about paranormal and supernatural things, that topic came up. We talked about it. Basically, they made a good amount of money. But so what? People have owned the house since and nothing has happened. So convenient. But to your point about 2005's remake, at the time, there were worse things being remade. This was one of the better things being remade. And Ryan Reynolds is essentially the lead of the movie. So
yeah, 100% the lead. Yeah, he's great. I'd say this is where I get like a red light showing up on my forehead before the episode's over. I feel like this is a more compelling and interesting movie than the first one in almost every way.
Wow, nice. Huh.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair. I was actually surprised you didn't pick another horror movie that he was in that I feel like is even less talked about. I saw it in theaters. I enjoyed it. I kind of thought it was going to be. It could have totally been an MCU thing if they wanted it to be. If we were talking like grounded in reality and this is how this happens, this is how Venom gets to Earth. 2017's Life could have been a fucking Marvel movie. A weird Marvel movie, but it could have explained Venom because effectively the thing in Life is Venom, more or less.
Yeah.
Like, 3/4 of the way there. I haven't heard anybody talking about this movie since it came out. It's actually pretty good. It has fucking Ryan Reynolds in it, and Jake Gyllenhaal, and Rebecca Ferguson. Like, 3 actors who are killing it right now and have been killing it for a while. And Ryan Reynolds not in a lot of horror stuff. I think this, the one we already mentioned with Amityville, The Voices, and I guess you might possibly make the case that R.I.P.D. is sort of horror. I mean, there's ghosts and demons and shit. I'm not advocating. Look, I saw that in theaters, and I'm not advocating people go watch that movie. Other than if you want to see Ryan Reynolds and Jeff Bridges square off, which does have its merits, and that is entertaining on its own accord. But yeah, Ryan Reynolds hasn't done enough horror stuff. I mean, that's the thing. Like he can kind of move within genres so flawlessly that I don't think it's wild to cast him as the lead in a horror movie and him die in the horror movie. I think that would actually be a pretty compelling thing. I mean, again, maybe Blade Trinity halfway to a horror movie too, in as much as those Blade movies are horror or vampires, horror adjacent. I was kind of surprised you didn't mention Life, but when I heard where you were going, I was like, it's gonna be that or Amityville. I mean, people really are that animated about the first Amityville horror movie?
It's a classic for a lot of people, which I don't really get because there's not even. Again, you're talking about like once you know that it's fake, it's not a big deal. Whatever. My big thing, you still could have made a compelling movie. There's not a lot of scares in that first movie that last.
Nope. Because the story's not really that good. Like there were some flies and a voice said, "Get out." Like,
right.
That's it. Like, that's the story. Like, there's more. They supposedly see more shit now on Ghost Adventures than these people did in their house. Like, I mean, again, whether or not it's real is up to your personal feelings on the paranormal and supernatural. But yeah, I always think about that movie because it's one of the few times we also have like grisly bearded Ryan Reynolds, which is a look unto itself. For the most part, he's always clean shaven. Always clean shaven. So that's a good pick.
Before we carry on to our third question, anything else that you want to shout out or really give some love to?
There's plenty of things that are worth mentioning at this point.
I've got one, and that's it. Like
boy. Okay.
I mean, there's a lot that are great. There's one that I think he has one masterpiece left on this list, like a genuine masterpiece.
Oh my god. Okay. Give me a couple hints to see if I can guess it. Because I want to see, maybe I haven't even seen it, is what I'm getting at.
It wasn't going to be a pick for any of these because he plays a very small role, but the movie itself is a masterpiece. Dry comedy, incredible cast.
Dry comedy, incredible cast. And he is a bit part, huh?
Not bit part, but definitely less than a quarter of the film has him in it.
Oh, I know what it is, I believe. Is it 2009's Adventureland?
I love Adventureland with all of my heart.
I think I've heard you mention that before. I think you had let that slip at some point in our friendship because I think we were probably talking about Jesse Eisenberg. I think is because he's in that, right?
Yep. I think that was it. Yeah, it was probably Jesse Eisenberg. This movie, without everything firing on all cylinders, this movie would just be fairly boring. But this is like a romantic dramedy, essentially. And Jesse Eisenberg, Kristen Stewart are playing our two main characters. And they've got Kristen Wiig, Bill Hader, Martin Starr, and Ryan Reynolds propping them up with just hilarious one-liners and situations. And the way it's sitting is Jesse Eisenberg is falling for Kristen Stewart as they're working at this theme park together. And Ryan Reynolds is like the 8-year older than them person that Kristen Stewart is fawning over because he's like the older dude, and they go and smoke weed together. And he's like the the third wheel that
Right.
always comes in and foils things for Jesse Eisenberg. And the movie is just an incredible coming of age story. It is really well directed. Martin Starr, I mean, he needs to be in so many more things. He is hilarious.
He's in the
Another
MCU.
person, I was going to say another person from the MCU. It is just a wonderful showcase again for Kristen Stewart. Her acting has always been amazing, and I'm easily going to go in on her right now because last night I watched Love Lies Bleeding finally, and man, she's an incredible actor in everything she does.
It makes me so sad that I have to try and convince people that Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart are good actors. Just because they were in fucking Twilight doesn't mean anything. Look, they need to eat too. They like to make money. And frankly, if anyone has suffered in the absence of Twilight or post-Twilight, it's Taylor Lautner. Like, Taylor Lautner is the one who you kind of haven't heard from, kind of hasn't done anything. Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson have made names for themselves at this point, so far removed from Bella and Edward. Like, and here's the other thing. Frankly, if we're talking those people playing characters, Robert Pattinson will always be Cedric Diggory to me, motherfuckers, not Edward Cullen. And that was before Twilight even. So, yeah, it's crazy to me to have to convince people Kristen Stewart's a good actress. Like, fuck you guys. Come on. She's been nominated for at least one Oscar for playing Diana, which that was a choice. I don't know how well it worked. It was interesting. She made it an interesting movie. And Robert Pattinson makes, I think, consistently across the board interesting choices in the movies that he is in. He's worked with Cronenberg. He's worked with all kinds of people.
Safdies.
Yeah, like
Robert Eggers.
He's an actor, and one of Robert Pattinson's favorite movies is Corky Romano. No shit. So, he's a man after my own heart. I feel like it was like, Robert Pattinson, what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about how much you love Corky Romano? Because he's on record saying like it's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. It's like, sure, okay. I mean, I love Corky Romano too, so I kind of feel like that's a cool thing. But
yeah,
you'd mentioned Adventureland, Waiting. Pretty much a similar character that Ryan Reynolds is bringing to that. I mean, look, Waiting is one of those movies that I probably quote way more often than I think. Welcome to the Thunderdome, bitch, is a great line. No bacon on the salad, massa, is also another good line. Those are all Dane Cook. But Ryan Reynolds in that movie, that's very distilled Ryan Reynolds, but like not charming, kind of scuzzy, like scuzzball guy, like older guy who works in the service industry because he's a waiter at a restaurant, but he's wanting to fuck all the younger chicks, similarly to Adventureland. I love Waiting. And the fact that they literally say shit or get off the pot in that movie, which is, they literally just copped it from Kevin Smith, is, I don't know. Waiting is a movie that's in a lot of ways, like, again, a too perfect movie for Ryan Reynolds because he's perfect in that movie.
And the big thing from the two that we just mentioned, Waiting and Adventureland, both propped up by amazing, incredible comedy performances from two dudes from Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah. Oh, and also Justin Long is in Waiting, who,
Sure is.
Justin Long, and he's like the main character too. He's not even on the poster. It's like Ryan Reynolds is on the poster and not Justin Long, which, I mean, speaks volumes to Ryan Reynolds, I think, like as an actor, even in 2005. But you did ask, is there anything else I would mention? There are a couple other things that are things that he would go on to do that I think he did better earlier in his career. So a movie that I saw in theaters, I remember kind of being mildly into it when I saw it, but I kind of felt like it was taking itself a little too seriously, was 2006's Smokin' Aces, which he's the main character in that movie, but talk about a movie with an insane cast of people who have gone on to do other things. Peter Berg, Kevin Durand, Ray Liotta, Jeremy Piven, Chris fucking Pine is in the movie. Ben Affleck is in it. I mean, Joel Edgerton, a lot of people. Jason Bateman is even in the movie. It's a weird movie. I don't think it tonally hits all the beats that it's going for, but if you want to see a movie where a lot of actors who are doing a lot of amazing stuff now were kind of in the early days of their career or kind of in a lull in their career, Smokin' Aces is a good pick. Because he's kind of like the action guy now, and that's an action. I would say it's an action movie, maybe not all the way. It's like action adjacent. It's kind of yeah. It's a little Raid-esque. Like the setup. The setup is there's a guy at the top of a building who's trying to get into witness protection, and Ryan Reynolds has to protect him, and there are groups of assassins coming to the building to kill him. If that doesn't sound like something you'd be interested in, I totally get it. But for me, it was a pretty compelling setup. And I think the movie is good enough. But again, Ryan Reynolds now, Six Underground, Red Notice, Free Guy, The Hitman's Bodyguard. Like, now he's kind of the action guy post Deadpool. And this is one of the few like action movies that he was in pre-Deadpool that aren't also MCU movies. Because X-Men Origins is a action movie. It's just not a Ryan Reynolds movie.
Or DC, not just MCU.
And you had to open up that box, didn't you? The movie where Ryan Reynolds fights the space turd. Yeah, man, Green Lantern. There's a universe where Green Lantern is the movie that everybody wanted it to be. And that was like the opening salvo in a long line of successful DC things. However, it was not. So all it is now is effectively the punching bag for the Deadpool movies, which is fucking hilarious in its own right. I saw Green Lantern in theaters.
I saw it in a drive-in theater.
Yikes. I saw it in iPic, which was one of those like expensive movie theaters where they bring you food in your seats. Yeah, no. Green Lantern is a bad movie. Objectively and subjectively, bad film. Unfortunately, too. Thank God it didn't derail Ryan Reynolds' career, because you know what? There are movies like that have derailed people's careers entirely because it's a big budget movie built up around one person, and then they have the blame laid at their feet. Ryan Reynolds is not really bad in Green Lantern. He's just, the Green Lantern script is not good. Like,
yeah, he did the best with what he was given.
Yeah, I mean, he tried. He tried more than others would have. And man, was it Peter Skarsgård is the villain in that movie? Good Lord. What a strange actor that dude is. The choices that he makes, I'm always just like, what are you doing, man? Like, you're making some weird choices. He shows up in Green Lantern. He shows up in The Batman. He shows up in like all kinds of stuff. He's just floating around. That's Steven Dorff. Is the guy from Blade, not Peter Skarsgård. Yeah, what a weird kid. I'm so glad you mentioned Green Lantern. Ooh, good choice. It's like me mentioning R.I.P.D. People are just like, ugh.
You want to worship at the grail of Detective Pikachu for a moment?
It's a great movie. Right? You like it? Do you like it? No?
I haven't seen it.
Ooh, that's fair. I mean, look. Are you a Pokemon person? No, you're a human.
I've never been a Pokemon person in my life.
Are you a man or are you a Pokemon? If you're not into Pokemon, it would not have been a thing I would have expected you to go out of your way to see. But Pikachu with Ryan Reynolds' voice works. It works better than Chris Pratt's voice coming out of Mario's mouth or Garfield.
I don't think it's too difficult there.
I loved killing Goombas. Is that what it says? That's what they're called, right? He's got like a sheet in front of him like they gave out when people went to see Dune in the 80s, like a sheet of all the terms so people know what they are. Goombas, Bullet Bill, and Lakitu. Right? Those are things in the game? Yeah, it's weird. I mean, look, I think Ryan Reynolds is the better version of Chris Pratt. Like, Chris Pratt wishes he could be Ryan Reynolds in terms of charisma. I actually don't think Chris Pratt has any charisma. I think all the charisma he has is from the roles he's in. Ryan Reynolds has got that riz in real life, okay?
I hate to say it. I think Chris Pratt had it until he lost the weight.
Oh, wow. So it's like the ex-fat man thing.
Yep.
Ugh. Yeah. When they're like, oh, he's Star-Lord now. And on top of everything else, people just hate him too because of the narrative choices that were made in Endgame and Infinity War, where Star-Lord looks like the dumbest character on screen, and it's hard to wrap your head. I mean, there's that moment where they have the gauntlet off of Thanos, and he goes, "Where is Gamora?" And it's like, oh, this guy right now doing this. Yeah, Chris. I don't know. Chris Pratt just. the internet turned on him, is what it feels like, and the internet hasn't turned on Ryan Reynolds. And Chris Pratt had the internet turn on him, rightfully so. If you're not a fan of what's the name of that church, that very insane church that has like multiple documentaries about it now, Christ Light, Fairlight Church. It's one of those like new agey churches, and they're not supportive of the LGBTQ.
The only one I know of that's big like that is Hillsong. Is it Hillsong that he went to?
Yep. Sure is.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So yeah, Chris Pratt, like I said, kind of problematic on his own choice. Like nobody's dragging you to church, buddy, to go sit in the pews. But that's the thing. Like we mentioned with Ryan Reynolds, he doesn't have any kind of weird vestigial problems. He seems to be well adjusted as much as you can be working in this industry. So,
well, on on that note, let's go to our third question, Chris. What is the biggest impact that Ryan Reynolds has had on pop culture?
Making Deadpool a mainstream character. Is that not your answer too? Like, I guess, let me put it this way. If it's not your answer, it's because I took the obvious of obvious answers. I took the easy way out here.
Right.
But I took the easy way out because it's the obvious answer. Like, even if I'm taking the obvious way out, people do not know Deadpool without Ryan Reynolds' involvement. That's a fact. Whether he was the one that leaked the footage or not, doesn't matter. Once everybody was able to see the footage, even the people that were on the fence were like, let this man make the fucking movie, please. Right. So, yeah, I think for me, Ryan Reynolds is Deadpool, and they are now intrinsically linked forever. That may be what they show in the In Memoriam, is him as Deadpool. Like, he is part and parcel with that character now.
You think they'll show that and not his character from Just Friends?
Hey, buddy, I resonate a lot more with that movie now than I used to. I love Just Friends, man. That is a really good movie. But to your point about the proposal, like, there ain't very far you can go with that movie. It's a fun little romantic comedy, and that's it. Like, and it has Chris Marquette in it, who was not in enough things. But yeah, Just Friends is good, and it's got Anna Faris just being insane too, which
Speaking of Chris Pratt,
now to say you're sorry. Yeah, God. Yeah, let's just get this out of the way. If you cheat on Anna Faris and divorce her, like what? Like, excuse me? Like, I had the biggest crush on Anna Faris for the longest time. Because of Scary Movie 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I had the biggest crush on her for the longest time.
And then House Bunny.
I've never seen it. What is that? Is that the? No, it's not House. What's the one with Tommy Lee Jones? Man of the House. That's
Man
what
of the
I was
House.
thinking.
Yeah.
House Bunny. I've never seen it, but I've seen the poster.
So yeah, I think Deadpool being in the MCU and him being Deadpool, like in every sense of that word, is the film answer for this. So on the other hand, I do want to give a shout out that I kind of alluded to at the beginning of this. He and Blake Lively have somehow turned into like very benevolent, charitable entities in Hollywood, giving money to help with Ukraine relief. And we're not talking like some of these major celebrities. They're like, we'll give $10,000 to support your cause, which is literally like us giving $1.
Right. Cool.
We're talking
thanks.
Like $1.5 million donated.
Matching donation type thing.
Right. A very respectable amount of money given to stuff like this. And they've done it time and time again for multiple things. They both head up multiple foundations. Ryan Reynolds has done a lot in Canada for their art scene. He has like tried to give back consistently. Once he knew that he had made it, he's one of those that is seemingly doing his best to give some back and be a positive entity rather than just somebody that hides and hoards a shit ton of money. So I think there's a lot of positive that has come out of that front.
Yeah, I mean, again, being a positive force in the industry is not easy because the ability to do terrible things is a lot easier when you have a lot of money or you have a lot of power. And again, we'll do a Kevin Spacey episode at some point, I'm sure, and we'll have that discussion out in the open. But that's a good example of a bad person in the industry. Ryan Reynolds is a good example of a good person in the industry.
Yep.
And I mean, maybe the less obvious answer, and I think for me, again, as someone who's a fan of the Champions League, Manchester City won over the weekend for like the fourth year in a row, which is a team that I cheer for, which means fucking nothing to most people in this country. I say that with a caveat, though, because Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney have been doing God's work, as far as I'm concerned, getting obstinate, stubborn Americans to watch the better version of football, the version you can watch in 90 minutes and then be done and not have to watch 5 hours of advertising. And guess what? If you cheer for a team as an American, all the people that are going to say that you meet that also cheer for teams are going to say, oh, cool, you like soccer, not fuck the team that you cheer for, because not enough Americans like fucking football to begin with. But they're doing God's work with Wrexham, and Wrexham got, I believe, Wrexham got promoted to the Champions League. They were relegated before those two took over. Which, again, as someone who enjoys a fair amount of soccer and watches it on the weekends pretty heavily, it's nice to see that two Americans are making it a point to not just support the teams, but also do something around it. I mean, there are plenty of Americans that have stakes in Champions League teams. I mean, I think LeBron owns part of Liverpool. I mean, a bunch of American actors and sports people. I think even Brady owns part of a Champions League team. But Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney went and found a team that was not in the Champions League and made it a big deal to cheer for that team, where Americans can go, I cheer for Wrexham, and not only is it a show, but it is a real team too. And that's, again, Ryan Reynolds. Also, again, you mentioned the aviation gin thing. As someone who is a gin drinker, not a popular thing for people our age, but Ryan Reynolds banging the drum for that too. He's a pretty interesting guy in terms of the things that he throws his weight behind, because he's not, to your point, just doing the same thing everybody else is. He doesn't have a fucking tequila brand like everybody else does. He has a gin brand, and that's been his thing. He was doing that before Casamigos existed, or the Breaking Bad tequila that those two dudes made. He was doing that long. Effectively, everybody else kind of followed his lead in that respect.
Yeah, not much just to say on that front. So to wrap it up with our last question, is there, I guess probably for this one, the best way to give it would be a person that is a cinematic bridge to Ryan Reynolds. Somebody else who is semi-like him, that if you like this individual's films, you'll like Ryan Reynolds' films. So who are you picking?
I already said his name, Chris Pratt. He's the better Chris Pratt. He's like the evolved Chris Pratt. He's the Chris Pratt without any problematic things, or... Again, Chris Pratt kind of always plays the same character in anything that he's in now, but I don't vibe with that character as much as I used to. I vibe with pretty much everything Ryan Reynolds has done. So for me, it's Chris Pratt's like the halfway there Ryan Reynolds. There aren't a lot of people that are like Ryan Reynolds, because Ryan Reynolds kind of stands alone at the top of that hill of these kinds of people doing this kind of thing. Maybe a more adult friendly or kid friendly version is Paul Rudd. Again, similar thing, I guess, has had a rather long career, never really been problematic, known for his comedies, but has done other stuff, and is also just happens to be in the MCU now. So I don't know, Paul Rudd, Chris Pratt, again, there are other names that we could throw out, but they're all just kind of comedic actors who also do some other things.
So I'm going to throw one out there. That's the way I was thinking about it earlier is this is like Ryan Reynolds if he took an edible and he just kind of chilled. I'm going to throw out there Jason Bateman. And funny enough, I'm going to throw out
I was expecting
a Ryan Reynolds film with Jason Bateman. That's a pretty good breakthrough if you're going to like that, and that's The Change Up. It's a decent movie. It's not like rewriting the formula. It's kind of like a Freaky Friday type of script, but
body swap.
Yeah, it's a body swap comedy, and it's done pretty well. But Jason Bateman is one of these people that he kind of plays himself. He's got that quick wit response.
Yes,
but he's a little slower in delivery. He's a little more chill. But when you watch something like Game Night, he is comedy personified. When he's on top of his game, he's amazing. And I would throw him up there with Ryan Reynolds. They play well off each other in The Change Up. I don't think that he's made a lot that I would say stands anywhere close to the big hits that Ryan Reynolds has. But I will say, if you've not seen Game Night, it is a perfect movie, and you need to see it. So
Game Night's great. I just saw it for the first time in this past year. I would love to do an episode on Jason Bateman, but then it's like all comedies for the most part, like his
Right.
TV work. Hey, I mean, look, Ozarks is amazing, but we can't talk about that on this show. Like,
Nope.
Go watch it. But yeah, I would love to do a Jason Bateman episode because who doesn't want to talk about horrible bosses? I mean, we kind of
So
already
good.
mentioned it on our Colin Farrell episode.
Yep.
I fucking love Jason Bateman. He seems a little cantankerous as a human being, which I kind of love. He's him with that podcast with I always forget the actor's name. The guy from Will and Grace. The guy from Will and Grace, and then Will Arnett and Jason Bateman have like a show together. And yeah, it's like a video podcast, and their energy is fucking bizarre. But I love it because Jason Bateman seems like he's just, again, kind of cantankerous, but he always kind of now plays those characters that are just like kind of on the level of being fed up constantly with everything and has like a little bit of a short fuse. Yeah, Jason Bateman's a good one. He is a little bit more of a chill Ryan Reynolds, more of a serious Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah. All right. This has been a fun episode. There's so
Yeah.
many cool things that we could go down this path. I'm glad we ended up here. If magically, and maybe that's the other way to frame this. If you've never seen a Ryan Reynolds movie, or if you were anti-Ryan Reynolds, I hope that we did something to encourage you to check out some of these movies, because there's a lot of his things that people don't talk about because they think his big, like, mainstream big movies are obnoxious. Go watch some of these lesser known movies like Buried or The Voices or The Amityville Horror. There's so many of these random movies that are just waiting for you to discover them. Hope you like it. Chris, where can people find you if they want to hear more on your opinions on movies?
WeirdingWayMedia.com, but more specifically, not pacifically, the Culture Cast. You can find every single opinion that I have on any movie in terms of things like that on the Culture Cast. I guest on some shows, but those shows can also be found at Weirding Way Media. So yeah, other than that, I guess head on over to patreon.com/culturecast. $10 and up gets you access to Rankin' on Bond, which is a show that I do with Richard Haddam of Richard Haddam's Paranormal Bookshelf and Mike White of The Projection Booth. We talk about James Bond once a month. And if that's something you're into, we're still doing it because we've got a long time to be doing it because there's a lot of James Bond movies and we only do it once a month. So that's where you can find everything that I work on and a little bit more. What about you, Ryan?
I am everywhere under the name The Disc Connected, but major shout out today to one of my youngest babies at this point is the Physical Media Advocate. It's a magazine that I help produce on a monthly to bi-monthly basis, depending on how much we get in for that. It is available on Amazon in print form or digital or in lots of retail stores. These are covering film, physical media releases, reviews of current movies, reviews of older films, exclusive interviews, articles that are discussing forgotten movies, critical analysis of film. It's a real great time, and I'm just doing my best to keep that the mood of the 90s zine alive, and I feel like it's doing a pretty good job, so check it out wherever you can.
I get to write in it too. So there's also that. I am involved in some way, which is also fun. So
in multiple issues, yeah. We hope you come back for our next episode and that you continue to push your boundaries of interest in film. So until next time.